The winners of the future are going to be those who can still concentrate and have the patience to learn and absorb actual context in depth. The losers are going to be people who blindly react and lack any and all context. Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Chris Martinson. I'm here with another special scouting report. This one's called Breaking the Frame. This is really important. If you want to survive the future, if you want to thrive in the future, you have to understand what frame you're caught in. Not like these people. So these people here lack all kinds of context, and they have the inability to even explain what their positions are. Listen in.
How does boycotting Tesla save democracy?
It takes down a leader of the movement to dismantle democracy.
What movement?
Like Elon Musk, who happens to be Canadian raised as well.
Okay, so what's the problem with Elon Musk? What movement is he leading?
I'm sorry, I'm not here to debate with you. Sorry, you can do research on Google.
I know.
I'm not here to debate you. It just goes on from there. I've played this before during our signal hour, so I'm not going to repeat it all here. But this woman asks, I think, very reasonable questions, the journalist, the interviewer, and nobody's able to provide any context. It's just this assertion, Elon is very bad, and they have no context for that. These low context people are going to really get blindsided by the future. And I don't want you to be among them. I don't think you are. But this is important. Look, COVID was bad, right? But the economic damage that has been accumulated over the past 54 years, and I'm using a specific number for a reason, is going to be far worse. When the dam breaks on that, more people are going to become destitute and maybe even die from the effects than from COVID by an entire order of magnitude at a minimum. So we have to break the frame. Look, during COVID, right, people who had jobs were separated into two categories. Remember that? Essential and non-essential workers. The essential workers were mainly low-level service workers. They were bringing food and DoorDash to the non-essential workers, that is the laptop class, right? Who were actually more important than the essential workers because they were afforded the luxury of staying home during what was described as a deadly pandemic. I'm so sorry, you essential workers. You got to go out and risk your life so these non-essential workers can have their trash picked up and eat food and stuff, right? Of course, it was no such thing as a deadly pandemic, but the message was still received. Essential meant expendable, and non-essential meant those who must be preserved. And the list of non-essential office workers was really quite extensive. Look at this. Look at this big old list here, right? So what do we got? Generally speaking here, we got corporate administration, non-emergency legal services, non-essential, right? Creative and media people, consulting professional services, management consultants, accountants, all that stuff, technical, non-critical, real estate, etc. Okay, so generally speaking, these were people who before COVID came into the office, right? They had office jobs. During COVID, they got to work from home. After COVID, companies had to begin resorting to really draconian tactics to try and force these people back into the office. They didn't want to go, right? You can see all these tons of articles out there, right? It's a morale killer, they say, to return federal to the office, say federal workers. Total morale killer, right? Forced to go back. Government workers managed to cling to remote work. You can see all the headlines here and many more besides. Now, this is important for a couple of reasons, right? So what happened? What happened was the old frame of a job requires you to get on a car or a train, commute, drive in, traffic jams, work all day in a downtown office, and then reverse that whole thing, commute home. That frame got broken. People suddenly discovered that they hated commuting, and they often got more done at home anyway. And together, these things maybe offered a better lifestyle and satisfaction and job performance, right? So the frame of work equals commuting, that's just what you do, that got broken. And once you break a frame, it's really exceptionally difficult to unbreak the frame, right? Once you find out your partner's cheated on you, You get that as that, like the whole frame of your relationship before then is now irrevocably altered. So this demonstrates something really important here, which was that something that was just widely accepted, right? It gets reexamined, and it's impossible to put that genie back in the bottle once it gets out. So now those holding this context knew to avoid, say, if you knew that this frame got broken, that people weren't going to return to offices, and once they understood that they hated commuting and were allowed to live into that new reality, once that frame was broken, well, guess what happened next? Well, if you knew this, you knew the commercial office space as an investment class was going to get toasted, and you were going to dodge the associated commercial mortgage-backed or securities or CMBS paper like it was on fire. And those without the context got hosed in this story. I mean, it's a huge deal. Like look at this, right? More or less papered over, but this is going to bite hard for a number of years yet, 2025 and beyond, right? We see that office vacancy rent pressure, fewer workers, office demand tanked, nationwide vacancy rates of 17.2% in 2021. The CMBS paper I talked about, a huge spike in delinquencies, that's still ongoing. A debt maturity wall with over $2 trillion in commercial real estate debt matures by 2025. That's all going to get refinanced, right? And that's at a time when treasury yields went from 1.5% to 4%. Oops, much more expensive carrying costs now. You got valuation drops, which is a 20% decline in office values by 2025, bank exposures, all of that. Now, this was all predictable by anybody who understood that what was going to happen when the commuting frame got broken. That's why it's important to understand the frame you're in and when the frame gets broken. Because you can't convince people now that commuting and going into an office building is a better lifestyle for them, and they're going to resist it. Now, you could force them, and I'm sure some forcing will happen. But at any rate, those who have the right context, they know what the underlying issues are and the drivers. But it's always more than just the numbers, right? The numbers are just part of it. It's the psychology of it all. It's the frame that people hold, the frame they're operating within. So in this case, it was understanding that people really just don't like commuting. It's a waste of time and life energy. Often it's miserable. It's a traffic jammed experience. The frame, though, was before COVID was, oh, everybody has to do it, so I'll do it too. COVID suddenly revealed that that wasn't necessarily true. And that genie is not going back into the bottle. So there's a bigger frame than this even that's breaking right now, right? And it's just, and by the way, look at this. This is the office CMBS delinquency rate. Like we are back, at least for that class of real estate, commercial mortgage-backed securities that are related to office space, we're at the same default rate that we saw at the height or depths, depending on how you look at it, of the great financial crisis. So that's pretty serious, right? So obviously understanding the frame of things is important. Now, just as the vast bulk of people, right, myself among them, during the time I was a commuting worker, and I was for a number of years, never questioned or thought to challenge the idea of commuting to work in an office building, with very few people, especially not even myself, right, had questioned the core premises up to this point of the dollar and investing. So I want to look at that because this is the frame that's about to break. Now, the frame right now of investing is entirely constrained for all of us because we live in an airtight dollar universe where the one and only rule is, and you understand this because you live in this frame, you have to invest with an eye to the idea that dollars lose their value over time. We call that inflation, but it's more accurately described as the dollar losing value, because that's the actual process, right? Now, I described this in great detail in the crash course, but here's a quick review. Suppose you have an orange, that you could eat. An orange, you got a house and an ounce of gold. And those cost you respectively, let's say $1, $300,000 for the house and $3,000 for an ounce of gold. But in 5 years, you suddenly discover, you wake up, get clocked on the head, Rip Van Winkle, you wake up and you discover that the orange, which magically hasn't rotted, is now $5. Your house is $1.2 million and gold is now $15,000. Wow. With a dollar frame of reference, you might think, wow, you picked wisely. You've gotten rich, right? You're now worth 5 times as much as before, right? assuming, your orange again didn't rot away. But are you actually any richer than before? Because in fact, if you think about it, you're in exactly the same position as before, because the orange is still an orange. It has exactly one orange's worth of utility. The house, same thing. It's still a house, provides exactly one house worths of utility, same as 5 years ago. And absolutely nothing happened to the gold ounce because gold's atomic and molecular character is immutable. You can take a gold coin and sink it in the ocean, which is one of the most corrosive substances I know about as a boater. And 1,000 years later, it's still exactly the condition it went down in before. Nothing happened to it. All right. Further, let's think this through further. The relationship between each of those items, right? Between the orange, the house, and the ounce of gold. It's unchanged from a ratio standpoint. It takes exactly the same number of each of them to buy the others this year as it was 5 years ago. What has changed, though, is the number of dollars it takes to buy each one. That is, it's the measuring stick, the dollar that's changing, not the thing being measured. Now, that makes it a very poor measuring stick, right? You want your measuring sticks to kind of be uniform. And that's one of the characteristics that money is supposed to have. So we don't actually have money. The dollar is not money. It's currency. Mike Maloney of GoldSilver.com makes that point all the time. His Hidden Secrets of Money makes that point. What we call money is currency. And we have to call it currency because it violates one of the core precepts of money, which is that the yardstick can't constantly be changing its length, mostly shorter, right? You know what? Gold and silver are my top choices to protect my wealth against inflation and economic instability. Now, with all the monetary debasement and all these geopolitical risks going on, hedging your wealth has never been more important. I recommend that everybody own some gold and silver, physical, in your hot little hands. But what if you want to hold it elsewhere? GoldCore is an excellent choice and will rapidly and securely deliver physical gold and silver to your doorstep. But GoldCore also lets you buy and store your gold and silver in high security vaults in places like Switzerland or Singapore or the US at your choice. And for all of my followers, GoldCore will provide your first 6 months of storage for free. With GoldCore, you get the convenience of buying and selling precious metals as easily as stocks, but with the security of your metals being fully allocated and segregated, meaning they sit in a secure location, on a shelf, in a box, with your name and your name only on it. Now, unlike your stocks, where you are actually a subordinated security entitlement claimant, something we learned during our Great Taking series, you are the one and only named owner of your metals. But just like stocks, you can still sell your metals instantly at market prices without any unnecessary delays. Need liquidity? GoldCore gives you immediate access to cash. But if you prefer physical delivery, getting them shipped to you is a mouse click away. GoldCore offers a range of investment options from gold and silver coins and bars to self-directed IRAs, again, all with fully segregated and secure storage. Take control of your financial future today with GoldCore, where investing in precious metals has never been easier, more secure, or more transparent. Remember, Peak Prosperity followers get 6 months of free storage. So sign up now at peak.fan/GoldCore to secure your 6 months of free storage. Again, that's peak.fan/GoldCore. Now, this might seem esoteric, but it's not. It's really not. It's the true frame, and it's been true for millennia. Here's a short example. In 1929, 10 kilograms of gold cost $6,600, and the median price of a home was $4,902. And in 2024, 10 kilograms of gold was $756,000. The median price of a home was $384,500. So it turns out that exactly the same number of kilos of gold that you needed in 1929 to buy a house is the same as today. Would you look at that? Even though a house was $4,900 and now it's $384,000, our measuring stick just shrank like crazy. But the thing that you actually care about, gold, houses, food, cars, all of that, none of that changed. None of that changed. So it's the dollar that's changing. Now, as I pointed out as well in the original crash course in 2008, in Roman times, it took the equivalent of about a troy ounce of gold to buy a really fine toga. And today it takes about an ounce of gold to buy a really nice suit, right? The more things change, the more they stay the same, right? Okay. Now, I'm going to go in part 2 for my subscribers, really important. I'm going to talk about all of this is leading up. Once we break the frame, it's leading up to this conclusion that I believe that if you look at things from a certain perspective, my perspective, macro perspective, the Fed is going to have to print again. That next move that the Fed's going to undertake, that by Fed, I mean Federal Reserve, it's going to be bad for you. And gold is telling us the tale, but to get there, we need context. And to tell that tale, I'm going to have to rewind to 1944, take us through 1971, take us through 1968, take us through 1996 through 2001. There's some elements here we have to tell. That's what this whole story is going to be about when I get into part 2. Now, so I haven't quite gotten to the frame that really needs breaking, right? Okay, sure, I get it. It can be a real mind bender to discover that it's your measuring stick that's changing, not the things being measured. That takes time. I get it. But even that's less of a challenge than understanding the intense marketing we've all undergone from Wall Street, mainstream media, on the need to invest. You're a smart person if you invest, smart investors, you have to invest. But they don't mean invest, they actually mean speculate. And the reason you have to invest or speculate, implied and almost never explicitly stated, is because inflation is going to destroy the value of your savings. And nobody really has to say it because you already know it, right? You know it from your lived life experience. That's just how things are, like commuting to work. It's just a fact of life. Something we all know. So you just live with it, right? But is it? Is the choice between losing the purchasing power of my money if I save it, or placing it at risk to try and grow it faster than the rate of inflation, what we call investing, right? It's just handing it over to Wall Street, closing our eyes, crossing our fingers, hoping for the best, right? Okay, this gold example here suggests there's actually a third option. Again, rarely talked about. You can simply maybe put your savings into gold, and it won't make you rich, right? You still need the same number of kilos of gold to buy a house or a toga, but it will keep pace with inflation. Now, surprising to many people, perhaps, is this chart, is the fact that this entire millennium, gold actually was a better investment than the U.S. stock market. This is from Bloomberg. If you had bought 1 unit of gold and 1 unit of the stock market on March 31st, 2000, you carry that forward to today, you find out that the gold has gone up a little over 1,000%, and the S&P is a little about 480%. Gold's done a lot better than stocks. No fuss, no muss, no risk, especially not the risk from the great taking, which is something that other things we'll talk about later. Okay, so my readers are also going to appreciate that gold did this without any of the raccoon risks associated with Wall Street. In particular, that physical gold, again, in your hot little hands, zero risk from being appropriated by those who installed and operate the great taking machinery, which you need to know about, which is both a significant and, dare I say, underappreciated risk by almost everybody. And again, context is everything. Once you know these things, you can make appropriate choices. That's why the mainstream media, that's why the powers that be want us to have no context. That's why when there are revolutions, the first thing the communists, the authoritarians, the socialists do is they tear down the statues. They don't want you grounded in your past. They ruin the libraries. They get rid of the Christians. They basically upend and tear out all the history books and rewrite them. Because a people without context are a people that are easily manipulated. So that's why it's super important we understand this kind of context. Now, the story that we've all come to accept, usually without questioning our context, is that inflation simply a fact of life. It's just how things are. Chris, come on, grow up. It's inflation. It's a fact of life. Get used to it. And because of that, you got to take risks in the stock market to offset that, right? You got to keep swimming. But I'm going to have to stress something here, which is that persistent inflation is both, it's a modern invention, and it's a function of the intense mismanagement of our fiat money system by the Federal Reserve, Washington, D.C., all with the enabling assistance of bankers and Wall Street. Consider this, if you will. Look at this chart here. In this chart, you can see that prior to World War II, prices sometimes went up, which is red, and sometimes went down, which is blue. So sometimes we had inflation. That's red. Sometimes we had deflation. That's blue. That's up until World War II. And then ever since then, it has been nothing but up. It's red. Just red, 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 red. All through this period here. By the way, this chart, I got this on the Wall Street Journal. So if you want to know, yeah, it says so up there. But this is just monetary history. Okay. Well, until World War II, the system, and that we all knew and love, right, or hate, right, was put in place, the one you live in. And ever since then, prices have only ever gone up, which is that the value of the dollar, our national, international measuring stick, has just gotten shorter and shorter and shorter. It's gone down, 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 down. Now, this is a little hard to interpret because you have to mentally sort of adjust. Sometimes prices go up, sometimes they go down. What does that look like if we just put that on a chart and it looks like this? Now you can see we start way back here. Let's see, between, let's call this the founding of the country back here, 1775, we had this little Revolutionary War. Prices went up, but then they came back down again. There was another little skirmish here. We had the War of 1812, and then prices came all the way back down again. From 1775 to 1850, we had exactly zero inflation. That is, for those 75 years, you could have earned money, put it in a bank, taken it out, and if a house was $4,600 at the beginning of that, it was $4,600 at the end of that period. If a suit of clothes was an ounce of gold at the beginning of the period, it was an ounce of gold at the end of the period. If you, whatever you did, it was like, oh, but then we had the Civil War. This was punishing inflation. People hated it, but then it came all the way back down again. So that we can say by the time the Federal Reserve was created in 1913, the country had experienced from start to finish exactly zero cumulative inflation. That's because sometimes it went red, sometimes it went blue, it bounced up, it bounced down. But from 1775 to let's call it 1910, absolutely nothing happened. A dollar was a dollar, and off we went. Okay. Now, sure, yeah, there were, brief periods of excess there and those spending in the wars. Got that. But after those wars were over, after they concluded, prices went back down. Now, why? That's because we were on technically a silver standard with gold then placed as a fixed reference to silver. So the silver dollar was, I think, 371 and some odd grains of silver. No more, no less. It's crisply defined, right? Now, the reason that prices went back down here after going up during these wars, well, we already discussed it. It's because a house is a house, an orange is an orange, a suit of clothes is a suit of clothes, and an ounce of gold and an ounce of silver all still had exactly the same relationship to each other before the war as after the war. Now, before the Federal Reserve came along, you didn't have to invest to avoid losing your savings. You didn't have to. You simply worked, and whatever surplus you had, you bought gold and silver, and that was that. Now, if you wanted to invest, if you wanted to speculate, if you wanted to place your capital at risk, that was a separate decision to make. And you could make that. And many people did. That's how our country got ahead, right? Now, that one usually carried the usual relationship between return and risk. But nobody was forcing you to invest. In this period of time, there's no forcing function. This is a forcing function. You have to invest. There's no alternative, right? And that's absolutely the case if you're, say, in a company match 401k plan that only has access to, say, a limited universe of Wall Street operated long-only stock and bond funds, right? Well, you're thinking, yeah, but it's okay, Chris, but look, this is this inflationary experience, that's level territory. That's level horizon to you and me. That's where we grew up. That's just how the world works. But I'm telling you, that's not how the world works. That's how it's recently worked. And it's only done so because of some heroic activity to suppress the canaries in the coal mine. And that's gold, that's silver. And that's what we're going to talk about when this all breaks. That's what part 2 is coming up on this. All right. But you say, yeah, we're going to inflation. You just have to inflate. You have to invest for inflation. That's just what everybody does. So I do it too. Well, now that frame is breaking, right? And more people are getting the clue. And I'm receiving calls from people now. I know for these light bulbs are now going off, right? Chris, what was that stuff you've been talking about all these years, right? Listen, as with commuting, though, once that frame is broken, it's ridiculously hard to get back to the original frame. Once you understand that the dollar has been this horribly mismanaged and that there has to be a relationship between the amount of dollars produced and the underlying economy, which is the things that the dollars only have usefulness for because you have to buy things with them, a dollar is supposed to be a store of value, and it's not. Okay? And so it gets ridiculously hard to return to that original frame, as I said. It's the proverbial red pill moment from which there is no return. And there's nothing more important to your financial future than knowing where this ship is actually headed. And in order to know that, you have to understand how we got here in the first place. So in part 2 for my subscribers, we're going to dive into my macro view of how and why exactly this dollar system is going to have to be sacrificed by the Federal Reserve in order to preserve the bond market, and why the Fed is going to have to begin printing money again by the buckets more than ever before, and this time it's going to really hurt, and how all of this inescapably leads back to hard assets. Now, if you're not a subscriber at Peak Prosperity, I wish you the best of luck. I strongly encourage you to become as resilient as you possibly can. But for the people who are subscribers, this is a big one. And as you know, we've been on a big tear this year, putting together big, giant pieces of information about the impact of AI, which is one whole thing we had to consider, about the impact of how people make decisions and how those low context people even came to be, and why I think it's not organic. There's people pushing buttons in this story. Understanding that we may be under enemy attack as a nation by people who want to destroy it. And there's no surer way to completely ruin a country than to ruin its system of money. And our system of money is on the path to ruin. And I don't want you to be on that same path. There's a way off of that path. I've shown you some of it. Now I'm going to build the rest of the case. For all of you who are Peak Prosperity subscribers, follow me back. We'll have the rest of the tale there. For everybody else, thank you for listening, and have a great weekend. Bye for now.